Okay, it's okay. So maybe I will have like the first slide on, and this is the title today, because I think the reasons of why I asked Dr. Thanapol to join us is really because like we are doing a lot of things that sort of like called contemporary music now in our schools, and there's always this fight between contemporary and something that so-called not contemporary, and is it possible that both are valid? And then that this fight, instead of fight, it becomes a discussions that we can go further. And it seems to be like in the music world, there's a lot of rift between conductors, like earlier in conductors, composers, musicians, conductors. So there's always these push and pull. So it's better that we all on the stage today, and then maybe possibly discussing, put all the things on the table so that we can try to maybe pull some ideas out. So the first thing, and we'd like to go under the directions of the conductor today. So it's called Conductor's Contemplation or Conversation. So
yeah, actually, if you would like to, if you would go back the slide, I want to point out that if Ajahn Anothai's gimmick to put this session titled in the all C of Conductor's Contemplation, a conversation with conductor and Colloquist with all C. Okay, so thanks Ajahn Anothai for creating this wonderful title. So I would like to start with give you some kind of a brief introduction of what are we going to talk about today. So of course it's conductor of contemplation, so it's going to be me contemplating a lot of ideas, and it can be a bit of a stream of consciousness, like thinking about a lot of things. And so I would like to start with presenting my idea about conducting. Okay, and we have my natural enemy sitting beside me here, which we're going to share different perspectives. Okay, so the theme of the conference is now. Okay, so I got to think about now and music making. Okay, and so I found that the idea of the present time is always an important aspect of at least my creative process as a conductor. So let me define the scope a little bit, because conductor in the contemporary music world, they do a lot of things that is the extra addition to the conventional orchestra conductor. So let me start with making it simple by let's assume that we are talking about the conventional written down music, okay, and after that we can add more elements. And so the time, let's define the time, okay? So when we talk about the now, time for me, there are two kinds of time. One is a point time, or I know in German there's some philosopher use the term Punktzeit, Zeitpunkt, time. Zeitpunkt, sound of time, or I mean the point of time, right? So to explain that, for example, when we're looking at listening to the metronome, that click at that exact moment, right? That's kind of a point time. And then there's a time in duration, which is something that probably we are more familiar with, the sound that occurs in duration, like now, like when we are speaking. Like I'm speaking to you, it's a series of words that it takes some time for the word to form into a sentence so that we can understand it, so it takes some duration. Now, the now, right? The now can be of, for me, three versions. It can be three meanings. Now of the point time, right? The exact moment of metronome. Musicians execute note exactly together, right? Or the clock hand, right? The clock's hand, that second. Or in Buddhist philosophy practice, there is the thing called anapanasati, where you're actually breathing in, breathing out, and you practice your mind to be exactly with the moment of you breathe out and breathe in to capture that exact moment. Okay. The other is the duration, which is the continuous time. When we talk about now I'm talking. Now I'm talking if the event, or now I'm going, now I'm swimming. If the event that is not that exact point, but it's actually ongoing, right? So that's in English grammar, we probably use the word present continuous tense, right? And then the other one is more of a state. For example, I'm sick, right? I'm healthy. I'm married. So that's something that is being the state. Okay? So I think the idea of the now or the present time, for me, categorized into these three meanings. Now, how does that connect to the music making process? Okay? So for me as a conductor, I was taught always that the process of music making is that first, I mean, you have two tasks. Is that one, you are working on the podium, right? On the podium is the place where the musicians see you, the audience see you, waving hands, do some meaningless gesture or meaningful gesture, right? And the other one that is more of a private activity of the podium, which is use all kind of resort, use all kind of methods to get to know the score. Like, okay, for example, I'm conducting Brahms one, right? So I need to find any method, any way for me to know Brahms one, right? Now, the fact that I'm getting to know, trying to know the music. So a lot of times it got me to contemplate or to think about, so what is Brahms one? So what is it? So sometimes I look at Così fan tutte overture by Mozart, for example. So what is it? What is this piece? You know, it's notated in it's a nice score, but you know, how does this work? How loud is the first chord, or how short is the second note? You know, things like that, things that are not written in the score. And what makes Così fan tutte overture a Così fan tutte overture, you see? So if I play it, it says andante, of course. If I play it in the tempo of 80, is it this overture? If I play it at 120, is it still this overture? You know, so there's a lot of things that I think about. And how do I acquire the knowledge of this music? So if I put it in terms of philosophy terms, I might use the word ontology, interrogation of what is the nature or of the existence of the piece, and some epistemology method of how can I know about it. You know, when I look at the score, there are two ways to get to know it. First is look at just the score itself. So if you are a literature enthusiast, you probably sometimes analyze the work, right? And one way is that you just read the book, right? And try to interpret it just from whatever is in the book, right? So in this case, I look at the score, and sometimes I try to find, okay, so how fast this should be in andante. Andante in cut time. What's andante in cut time? And then I have presto, and then so probably I might find the tempo that, okay, let's assume this work has one tempo. This work has one tempo. So I need to find a tempo where the first theme and the second theme works well. Something like that, right? Something like that. Or try to find the balance of the form, structure, blah, blah, blah. So that's the information I get from just looking at the score. The other way is that I also get some help, some assistance from the external sources. Like I might read about it. I might study the other scores, historical context, Mozart's letters, textbooks, blah, 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 right, to get me to understand the score. But that's all the thing that I need to use. In the end of the day, you need to use all kind of resort, all kind of method to get to know the nature of this piece, right, to understand it. And now there are a lot of things, of course, that is not written on the score or cannot be written on the score. And so I know that, I'm a sort of composer myself, write some music, so I sort of have an idea about writing things down. I know that there are a couple of different ways to think about notation. One is the composer relies on the nature, the convention of writing the score. It means that sometimes you have an idea of how the music works, right? You have idea in your mind, and then you notate it with subconsciously knowing that there's going to be some kind of tradition, convention, performance practice that will realize this, those gap of the idea, the things that you haven't really, the things that you're not really very much specific, right? Like, for example, how short is the staccato or something like that, right? Sometimes you just leave it out like Mozart score, like there's no even staccato or tenuto, right? And so you rely on the existing performance practice by live musicians. Or the other way of notating the score, if you really have this idea that you really want it to be very exact, you might need to develop the other kind of notational system, right? So which means that when we look at the traditional score like this, it can be assumed that the composer, will rely or need to be rely on the performance practice.
So maybe I stopped you there first.
Sure. Okay.
Because we actually, during our meeting, we agreed that we will touch upon 6 subjects, and today.
All right.
So I allowed we kindly have our conductors contemplating. So this is what happened in his head when he's standing in front of the whole orchestra and the score. So there was 2 things. There were two things that we mentioned earlier. He mentioned about time. Thanapol mentioned about time, and briefly already jumping into our second session, which is the score.
Yep.
So back to you, Christoph.
Okay. So my first question would be, since you said you said there are different forms of now, which form of now are you in while you're conducting? Are you in the point here? Are you thinking of what is going to happen? What happened? Are you reflecting? Or are you in the, I shouldn't have done so many push-ups yesterday?
Okay, to answer the questions, this question is extremely relevant to my daily life on the podium, because there's always different, different temporalities in my head while I'm conducting. So first, in order to conduct it, one mentor of mine said this once. He said that, before you start your first gesture to start the sound, you should hear the whole symphony from the beginning to end in one flash. And I think, what does that mean? It means that you actually have all the information stored in your head already. And I got to think, so what does it look like, this information of a symphony in my head that I can see in one flash? And so I got to think about this a lot. Sorry, it's a bit contemplative, right? So, think about this. Sometimes I think about when you are going to tell a fable, to tell a tale. It means that you actually know it from beginning to end. Right? You have that information in mind. Now, but the fact that telling the fable and playing the music, it relies on time. It needs the time to unfold the information, right? And so basically you have to, the first one is that idea in your mind already exists in you. I can compare maybe in the form of a file in computer. I don't know what form it looks like, but it's stored there. It just needs a time for it to be unfolded, right? And so
May I jump in just a little bit here? I have one question about the fable.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that when you're talking about when someone is telling a fables, and what fun, at least to me in traditional storytelling, is that it never ends the same way, or the storytellers always add different characters. So then it's no longer concrete. So is it the same way that you approach these types of things as well? That things that are fluctuated and have variations types of things? Does it only apply, this one flash, does it only apply to things that are already concrete?
I think that the difference about the fable is more of the tradition that allows you to improvise, ad-lib, or add stuff, right? But it depends. So let's say if we are working in the tradition of working on a piece, a piece that needs to be executed exactly as what notated, or at least something like that, right? So I think the information is more concrete, is a bit more concrete, right? So now, where was I? Right.
I might come in, maybe don't have you, because
Okay.
you actually unpacked 3 time levels already by talking about now. And I just wanted to point them out. The first one is the preparation basically dealing with the past to get at all to now, right?
Right.
That is like you study your score. As you rightfully said, you need to. It helps to know where the composer is coming from. It helps to know the convention. It helps to know why certain things are written in a way, because we need to know what the sources of the composer was, what was his education. With Mozart, for example, it's very easy. We know exactly what his father wrote, his teacher wrote about all of this, so we can easily read it up. So also understanding in what phase of life was the person in, and even knowing what the person ate, where the person lived, whatever you come up with, helps to understand that point that led the composer to that point where you start your performance on. Then you are at the actual performance, which is the now. The music is happening now. And if you see that in the sense of an actor, that would be you study your part, you know exactly your cues, you know when to come in. But in the now, when you perform it, at least in my experience, the most successful performances sound like it's just invented. It's just, you don't even know yet where this is going. You are really, really at the moment where it sounds like you're just composing it, right? And at the same time, you need to be in the future knowing where it's going, right? Or where you want it to go, but also in the sense of what you want your audience, what you want to achieve, and what energy goes over to the audience. So what you're achieving there. So you're basically with your now in the focus point of these three things going on at the same time.
Yeah. So let me go back to the first question about the fact that I feel many different temporalities going on when performing music, right? Is that when I talked about have the information in me, and so which means that I have an idea, right? I have an idea of what this music should sound like. I have an idea what Brahms one should sound like, and then so when I actually rehearse, so there's a present time of me, right? Exactly. Okay, this bar, this thing's happening, and then now the other thread pose itself from the orchestra that I want to hear. So this bassoon sound occur on the first beat of this bar, and then Maestro Christoph just play something, and then that doesn't align with my idea, right? So now I have my now and then your now, and so I need to do something, right? To fix that. So the music goes on. So I keep thinking about it. Okay, how should I fix it? I have that in mind also. And the other thing is that I still need to conduct the music. As I be with the music in the present, I think about what Maestro Christoph just played, and then in the future also of what's going to be happening next, right? And then, one teacher of mine saying, when you want to stop the orchestra, you should have at least 2 or 3 reasons to stop it, and then should be no more than 3. Because so that you don't waste orchestra time, you have enough information to say, or sometimes the best thing is that when that mistake happens, you continue conducting for a while and to process the information of what you want to say, so that you again don't waste orchestra time. So Maestro Christoph played wrong note at bar 14, so I keep continuing and I form my idea of what to say at bar 20, and then I stop and then I go back, which means that I'm dealing with this past and now and the future always, right? So that's...
You mentioned something. You said you have a clear idea how Brahms one shall sound like, so have 96 musicians on stage.
The what?
You have a clear idea how Brahms sound was, so have 96 musicians on stage in front of you. And they might not align, so... the question that there is for me, from a perspective, how much does your idea change as soon as you hear the other ideas?
Oh, that is something. There are at least 2 types of conductor. One is a tyranny, like Toscanini style. Is that you are my piano, I play, you sound exactly what I want, right? So that's one type of conductor. The other is more of the one who like a chamber musician, like a member of the ensemble who plays and then take the ideas, bouncing the ideas, inspired. Sometimes I think most conductors believe that they have concrete idea and clear idea. But a lot of times there are at least two cases. One is that I found, oh, this sounds much better than I thought. I almost steal it, right? Making it my credit, right? Something like that. And the other is that this probably is not going to be possible. Like for example, I expect some great sound in mind, and then I'm conducting some orchestra that doesn't have much experience, right? So sometimes I need to negotiate with that. Some conductor does, some conductor does not.
Yeah, I just at rehearsal you can be tyrant as much as you want. At the performance you will be silent.
Right.
So you can be angry afterwards with what's happened and so on, but you still need to negotiate if somebody comes in late and so on. So you still need to be there, and so did Toscanini, especially with his great experience in opera conducting, where it's just the distances that you have on stage, and somebody's doing there, and there's some costume problem, sings a bit late, sings a bit early. He immediately was there, negotiated. Maybe later he was angry, right? So the whole tyranny is more a tyranny of preparation than in actually you sound like I want you to sound. Is more of being able to I would say it's more of a authoritarian teacher than that's how they all were able to sustain, because this kind of tyranny would have been already unacceptable at the time when they were, if it would not in this kind of teaching way. But nowadays you have to collaborate. You won't get it, especially as a young conductor. When you start out, you might stand in front of an orchestra, if you're lucky, with musicians who know the score at least as well as you do. Some of them are composers themselves, and some of them might be even better conductors than you are.
Yeah, that's always intimidating. This is the first question when I start my degree in conducting, the teachers ask, across the street is Boston Symphony Orchestra. So I was in New England Conservatory, and then, literally across the street is Boston Symphony Orchestra. So if you were to step in front of them, they're going to play Brahms 1, which they played already for like 200 times, and it's going to be your first time of Brahms 1. So what are you going to do, right? And so what is your role there? They can play without you, right? Yeah. In the present, back to the question, be the performance that you cannot really control or do anything anymore. So I think it's what you can do is to inspire or to remind of what we have been rehearsed and fix the problem. I think most of the function of the conductor in performance is being a police cop, where you control the traffic, remind things, give signal, and maybe inspiring. I'm not sure if that's a myth or not, which you can share your perspective well. And get angry after performance, right? That's what we do.
May I maybe kind of like go back to some place? I think we are right in the middle of our talk at the moment. So if I can revisit this a little bit, because you decided to use the score as part of your presentations. I'm just asking, what do you think of, is it now, for example, like this score? Does it fix in time? Like when you show the score now, and when you bring the scores onto the stage, or when you memorize the score, is it the same time?
If you want, I see the score as a source of the knowledge of the piece. So let's say I need to conduct this Mozart overture, right? So I need to use any method to get to know it, right? And so this one, and so the music, right? The score is just something. It's a passage way. It's a path. It's a thing that I get to know.
Or is it a state? Is it a state of things that has been captured, or do you think that there's a certain point in time that you have to always go back to that?
I think the final product of studying it is that you have that information in you, right? Or provide you with access to the music that exists somewhere, but you have that knowledge. So it's the present time, it's a now in terms of the state that I know this score, I own this music.
So the now belongs to the person who's conducting it.
Yes, yes.
I mean, does it partially belong to the musicians as well?
I was just about to say we should not forget that a conductor does not make music. Right? A conductor is silent. The music is made by the musician that are conducted by the conductor. That being said, it needs a damn hell good of a musician to convince a professional musician to do something and align them with each other, to not make it just go out. So I'm not taking away the musician qualities of a conductor, but in the act of conducting, they're not making music. They're facilitating, right? Or negotiating, as you said, and also sometimes need to improvise. I've just latched on a little thing that you said before, that there are not even tenuto or staccato written.
Right.
And for me, by that one, why would there, right? What would it help? Knowing that we can read up about the traditions and so on, but also with not writing it out so clearly, the length, the composer actually gives you a way to get it into the now, because you're definitely in a different room than when the composer wrote it, and you'll be in a different room every time. So every tenuto or staccato means something completely different in whether you're in a rehearsal studio in a room like that, or whether you play it in a church or something like that, right? So you will need this flexibility of adjustment to make a score, and this thing is to make a score be in the now with you. So all the preparation, but the score needs to move with you where you are, and you need to adjust everything towards it. And so the score must be also basically as flexible as the musician in that sense.
I have another question, sorry. I'm just wondering, because as a conductor, you see the whole thing of different nouns happening, but as a musician, you only see your part. I mean, how
but
do
that
you...
doesn't mean that we don't know the other ones.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So it means that the musician should also realize of the different nouns that happen at the same time. I mean, is it practice generally for all musicians? Good one.
For musicians to take their job seriously, they have normally looked at the combined score and fit how their part is, and secondly, have a good auditory memory after playing it a couple of times and know exactly who is doing what. And ideally know their colleagues also so well that they already can anticipate what will go wrong. Like a good conductor hopefully knows in the orchestra also where the musicians will need their help, right? And if I look at that, I know that that G is very sharp on an oboe. I will have to come up for that one as well. So you anticipate. There is a moment of, and that is actually the question of the now again. That leads again with the now is the element of anticipation. What's going to happen?
Yeah. So it's not just one point in time, but really one affecting the others. So coming back to the balance, negotiation, collaborations, I think that's also a tyranny, and democracy, that's another thing. Anything else that you'd like to add on this point before departing to the next now question?
I always find it is the most difficult part of the job is to rehearse. The psychology of it, how you communicate, how you deal with many situations that sometimes you cannot really have an idea of what's going to happen. Or, sometimes you can expect that, okay, some specific people in the orchestra is going to attack you or something like that. That happens in the orchestra sometimes. But all the things that I think it's very difficult in terms of, if this thing happened, I want it the other way, how can I explain it? How can I convince them? Or sometimes, this can happen at times where the musicians disagree on certain ritardando or accelerando.
Yeah.
That happens too. So I find this is the most difficult part. But it's still that I think the best thing to have is that you still have a very clear idea of what you want it to sound, right? And then on the fly you can try to figure something out.
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, there's two forms of balance. Definitely the balance in communication, and this is one where now it tips into the conductor's favor, which is because, as I pointed before out, there are a lot of musicians who also know how it should sound, or have a clear idea of what they think it should sound, and like they would want it to sound, right? The brass definitely wants these fanfares to blast out as possible, and the woodwinds, but why am I all playing if the brass is playing like that? So they all have this kind of sound. There's strong sounds, ideas in there, and it might be even in just a small phrase where the flute and the clarinet disagree on how they want to phrase it. And then it's actually good to have the conductor who is not there as often as you not see every day at work, but there for a week or two, to take in the role of negotiating that. Mm-hmm. Really like a mediator, bringing in their own ideas, but of course a good conductor takes in account that if you hear something that works well, you better don't touch it, right? Mm-hmm, right. Because there's more important things to do again. And then there's the other thing of the real basic sound balance. And there is so that when you sit on stage, as I said, between the strings and the position, all different positions, you can't really 100% know how the balance of the combined sound outside is. You have a clear idea how it should be, but you can't know how it is. And there you need somebody standing at that spot, at the luxury sweet spot, where you can really hear how it will go out.
So let's add the third complications, the audience. How about the now of the audience?
Yeah, this to link the transition between the balance and the sound and the audience. I have this one problem that I always face on a daily basis as well, especially when we work in the different concert halls, different venues, or even in some venues that different seating, you can hear things differently. Because something like, so, if I want this piece to be perfectly balanced, like you are listening to headphones, that is mixed and mastered in the studio, right? So, if I want this to be perfectly balanced, so on what spot is the reference point? Is it what seat in the audience is the reference point, right? So, and sometimes I found myself on some stage that the podium cannot be used as a reference point at all, because sometimes you cannot hear things like sometimes you hear horns are very soft there, and then in the audience horns are very loud, right? And so I don't know, this is a problem that I need to do the best guess. Sometimes I go to the most expensive seat row to use that as a reference point. Okay, maybe.
Are you jumping up to the sponsors?
Something like that to maybe, okay, I make that the best sound. Now, the third factor coming in as the audience, right? That is something, sometimes when I'm sure, some composers think about the audience. They want the audience to like the piece, or the writer, they want their reader to like their novels and stuff like that, right? Now, I found that sometimes, at least for me, when we talk about audience, it's something very abstract, because audience is a collective, right? It's a collective kind of thing. It's not an individual where you can do the best work of studied your audience if it is the audience for specific events. For example, if you work with some kind of piece that have their fans, like they're coming to the concert, and probably they probably expect to hear this, right? And so that now you have some kind of information of how to work with the piece. But in general, the audience are a collective, very abstract and very diverse. And also they sit on a different place in the concert hall, which they will hear different kind of sound as well, right? And so to me, I usually use myself as a reference of, I guess maybe this should work, or I like it. Sometimes I just work that, okay, I think this work. I think this would work. But in reality, I really cannot tell.
This is quite interesting to me, that when you say that an audience coming into a concert hall with the past expectations of what this is, what some of the things that they want to hear, and then they wanted to repeat the past in the now. I think this reminds me of a good friend of mine, a German violinist. She mentioned about like it's like you get into the restaurant, order schnitzels, and you expect schnitzels at the end. I mean, is it always like that? I mean, is all the should the audience think like that, or should they not? I mean, what's your expectation as a conductor or musicians in the orchestra? Should they have this memory baggage traveling into the hall and listen to that? And just another thing, I was looking at the airports now.
Yeah.
Like before, when you have all these master things, and you hear exactly, no matter in what direction your head's tilt to. But now it's changing, and this is something I really like about this technology, that sometimes you can watch exactly the same film with your head tilting to the same, in a different way, and the film sounds different. I think that's changing as well, even with the recording industry. We have a choice to listen to what kind of things. We have a choice to as well. So we can create our own now. We don't need to be under the directions of the recording master's engineer anymore.
Exactly. So there also a lot to unpack. So you said whether the audience should come with this memory and so on. I don't think it's a question of should or should not. It's just how it is. Even for us, I guess, all of us, we, from certain pieces that we loved in our teenage years, or certainly we still have the sound of the first recording that we played up and down in our head, and that formed our mental picture of that piece, and it touched us emotionally. And if something else sounds differently, then there is a dissonance there that needs to be bridged and gapped. In addition to that is that people hear it via the headphones in perfectly sounding orchestra recordings. We know recordings are all just lies, right? They never played it like that. There are hundreds of cuts in there and even single notes corrected. And you ideally in a good recording hear on the recording with your headphones better than you hear in a concert hall, because you have nobody coughing next to you and so on. So, but this is not an excuse to leave the audience out there, because but more of a duty to bridge that gap and to be aware that the shared experience for the audience, but also the human energy on stage is part of the experience, and then you can, with that, teach the audience new ways of seeing the same piece. And that's an important duty, and I think from the musician's perspective, you never forget your audience. We've played so many silent concerts, as we called them, meaning for streaming only in the concert hall on stage during the COVID pandemic. And then there were, for a while, 300 people allowed in the hall that has, talking about Esplanade Concert Hall, which has 1,800 seats. And then the first time it was a full orchestra on stage, and there was 1,800 people in a sold-out hall after regulations eased. And it was so much easier to play, because the audience plays a role in how you play very much. You feel that energy very much, even if there be just one mass. So the more energy you get, actually, it is something very different of the silence of an empty hall as the silence that 1,800 people can create. So the attentive silence that is created suddenly becomes like a canvas where you can almost paint on as a musician, right? Which is just not there if it's an empty hall. So we have a duty to think of our audience. They help us a lot, not only in an artistic way. We should also not forget they also pay our meals.
Yeah, about the memory baggage. You know, I remember there are a couple of times when I did pop concert, where we perform music that's loved by the audience, especially in their memory from teenage years, as you say. You know, there's one time that I performed a piece, this piece that was performed on recording, and in the live concerts, many places recording on YouTube, and then so people listen to those. It's music performed by orchestra and with drum set, as a rhythm section. And then when I performed it, I thought, I think it will sound better in my perspective, or I like it better to have it performed on concert snare drums and concert bass drum. So I did that in the concert. And some of them were enraged by that, because they think, this is not the sound of this song. This song should not be performed by concert snare drums and concert bass drum. It should be that drum set, that tune specifically to create the sound of this composer, or so they said. And so, sometimes I have experience dealing with this kind of expectation as well.
That is exactly the point. So with this expectation coming from the audience, especially if you're a regional orchestra that plays to a regular audience, they know you playing certain styles, certain pieces. If you need to be aware that if you create a dissonance between the expectations, you need to have a good reason for that. Yeah. So the audience becomes a factor of why we interpret a certain way too. So you need to create be aware of the dissonance, and then maybe sometimes need to bridge it, or sometimes compromise because you don't want to give the audience the wrong experience.
I think this experience reminds me of when I attend Turangalila Symphony performed by SSO.
Yeah.
And I remember I heard another version in Edinburgh many years ago. And
I admit that our version wasn't that great.
No, let's not go there. I think it's a different version, and I think somehow when you heard the recording, the real performance, and after a while that you haven't heard it, it's sort of like accumulate in your head, and then it becomes something else. And when you have to match it with another thing that it kind of like fresh out of performance, then it's completely different. So it's almost like 4 different nows, and the now in your head is also growing in every second. So I think let's go to the last slide. This is the place that we would like also our audience to participate. So is there anything that you like to add in terms of like the role music making, our time and place as a conductor, as a musician?
Yeah, I would like to add this thing that I also connect to the last topic, and also something that I want to say in the introduction also, is that, the time, let's assume time exists. I'm talking like a physicist right now. Let's assume time exists, and it exists in a linear way, because there's a beginning and there's the end, right? Because when you perform a piece, there's a beginning, there's an end. Okay, so that is a safe way, that it's safe that we assume that time exists in a linear way. But now, when we understand the music, it's not linear. It's not linear because, let's say, for example, if I play a very soft chord, a soft C major for 1 minute, and then suddenly I played a cluster on the fortissimo, bam, there, and it creates some kind of, surprise, okay? And that element of surprise comes from the fact that there's an energy building up of that silence, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you create something, right, it creates an effect. So that effect is, of course, it's that exact moment, the point time where you play the fortissimo, but also it's the effect that occurs because the energy that is already has been collected from the beginning of the piece, right? And sometimes, let's say when we listen to a piece that has certain structure, sometimes when we think, when this tune appear or this chord appear, that works very well, that sounds so cool, because let's say the how it works according to what precedes it, right? And then after a while, we hear it, we start to think, this is not good anymore because the structure is so weird. Mm-hmm. It's because there's some new information happening. Mm-hmm. And then, so actually we cannot really judge the piece or appreciate the piece if we have not finish it, right? If we have not go to the end, you cannot really conclude about the work, right? But that's actually one way to think about it if you are kind of a structuralist that love the idea of the cohesive things in the structure. But I know that some of the listeners pay more attention to the moment. It's like they don't care much about the sense of the piece as a structure. Like, for example, when you watch a TV series, okay, some people, when it ends badly, so they say, this is a bad TV series, right? Some of them didn't care about the ending. They said, oh, I love this moment of the guy and the girl, and that's it. That's what made me happy. Okay, the ending sucks. It's okay. You know, something like that. So I think the way we experience and appreciate the piece of music can be in two ways. One is structurally, and that structure cannot be evaluated or cannot be judged or cannot be appreciated if it's not beginning to end. So the way, if in terms of appreciating this structurally, what happened about the time is that you have this thing is going on, and then the now, the sound that you hear, which is the effect of the things that comes before, and then you keep, and then you may have some kind of expectation, so you have to think in the future as the audience. And then this thing happened, it thwarted your expectation. You know, so I think listening to music is really non-linear because things jump back and forth all the time.
What you said remind me of the whole music history. So we always judge certain types of music according to that moment that it happens. But actually, I mean, we have to wait. We have to be quite patient with the music that we are facing, right? Because there can be many different moments in which the music appears, and they always have ways to kind of like find its own way to have the ending and leads to another chord, another note.
Yeah, it's a stage, and I'm sorry. So I want to relate this final point is that now this actually relates to me in terms of my planning, designing the piece as well. Is that, you know, if I want to create that special moment, how should I plan the energy? How should I plan the phrase? How should I plan the ritardando? Something like that. Also, that is something that is really relate to a performance, to execute, to realize, to actualize the piece as well in terms of planning. That you always have this in mind, that you want to plan surprise, you want to this kind of effect, or make sense structurally.
Can we celebrate it now?
I wanted to say something. I think our ability to remember and our ability to predict and foresee future and putting these two things into relationship makes it very hard for humans to experience the now as or time as something linear, but almost more in a Bergson way of time loops that focus in the point where I am now. And it's much easier for us to talk about what will happen and what has happened than about what is now in our entire thinking. There is nowadays an entire industry out there, books written about the power of now and mindfulness practices to get people more into the now. From my experience as a performer and musician, if I want the audience to experience that moment where they just am and just enjoy, it normally requires for me to stretch very far back and very far forward. So it'd be exactly on the opposite end. And if I'm improvising, seeing cast there and so on, and I want to be in the now and just to think intuitively, it needs a lot of preparation of putting the playground in place where I can do that, to create that space where I am, and he wants to definitely weigh in, and he should, on that topic.
Great considerations, and very nice to hear this discussion, because ultimately I think if we only have the now, we have nothing. And here's the interesting thing. I think that the brain, and maybe you mentioned that, or at least you alluded to that the brain is always functioning on many different levels at the same time. And there is, on the one hand, there is this idea of unfolding of music. So, and that means basically that different moments of now are connected. And our brain is extremely sensitive for this connection. So that means that the let's say a couple of nows together will create motion in music. I think the word motion or movement is very important. And I think the way that happens is very sensitive. That means that we're really sensitive for things like tempo or rubatos or how things unfold. At the same time, our brain is completely flexible in switching back and forth both into the past and in anticipating the future, not just for the shorter term, but also we can think years ahead and we can remember years back. And I think the secret to the whole story is that actually these things all happen at the same time on all these different structural levels. And our brain is able to somehow focus the attention and switch back between these different levels of experience. Yeah, it's extremely fascinating. But for me, that sort of generalistic idea of let's all go to the now and we'll be happy, I think that doesn't work. I prefer to think of the now as a kind of bubble with maybe the moment, the very moment that you cannot escape in the middle, but always that negotiation between what you remember that happened, your anticipation, and what you're planning to do. And if you don't put these events as a musician on in a special way on a timeline, nobody will be fooled. Nobody will feel that movement. Yeah.
Thank you, that's excellent. I wanted to add, if you really focus on the now as one point, right, then we are stuck on that one point. And music for me is communication, and communication works only directing over distances, whether they are time or even between people. Then it means it extends automatically.
Wonderful. So I think that's where we can, let's say, pause, not stop, but pause, because it's actually like this contemplation happens right in the middle of the whole festival. So I think it's about time for us to, since Monday, and then we have like we're in the bubble, so we're right in the middle of the tornado or something. So this is a place that we can sort of like contemplate a little bit, and thank you for bringing this up to us, and then really kind of like thank you, Christoph, also to be the Colloquist together and helping
Thanks so much for having me.
to provoking and lots of good questions and answers, and continue to be answers in the future. So if you, this is kind of like more of the discussion, but please also join us for tonight's late night concerts for another types of time by Morten Feldman for John Cage, violin and piano. That's
one now that lasts an hour.
Yeah. Yes, one now that is really encompass a huge amount of things that the way it kind of continue into reality is really quite wonderful. So please also stay for that in the evening if you can. And now I think the coffee is ready. So you guys should go and grab coffee so you can extend yourself into the future and come back with us with Professor Peter Thornquist's presentation. Thank you.